Thank you to the omnipresent person in the back who catches those things that I miss. So welcome everyone, and welcome Anita Horner and Marilee Sherry. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge today and your insights through this presentation entitled Addressing the Power Imbalance Between Family Groups and the Child Welfare System. And before we start, for those who haven't yet muted their microphones, if you can do that, it really allows us to hear the presentation without interruption. And if you have questions, it would be ideal if you could save them for the end of the presentation. And I'll be, watching time. This one goes to 3:30, so maybe about 3:15 we might stop for reflections and questions, and I'll monitor the chat room. And if we can't answer all your questions, or the presenters can't get to everything, please feel free to email them or email Linda Evans. That's in your flyer, your e-flyer that you would have received in your package. So the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Raquel, and good afternoon, everyone. I see lots of familiar faces and lots of new people to meet, and so very happy to be with you today. And our workshop style is more of a dialogue, and so hopefully we'll be having conversations throughout. But absolutely, Raquel, it will be very helpful if you can kind of keep an eye on chat and assist us in that way. So I am Marilee Sherry. I am joining you from the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, Mississauga of the Credit particularly, and the neutral peoples. In English, this place is called Brantford, Ontario. And so it's the territory that Rowan Smith, as a Haudenosaunee, it's territory of his people, who gave our opening this morning. So many of you know me, but I have worked in child welfare. I'm now retired. I can't believe it, almost 5 years, but worked in child welfare over 20 years. And most of my time since 2001, actually, no, I've lost the date. Anyway, the past 15 or 20 years, I've been involved with family group conferencing. I learned about it when I was a supervisor of a team, and the passion has followed me. So I've been a coordinator, a supervisor of coordinators. Before that, I did intake and ongoing work and supervised a team and training and mentorship. And so I'm also a member of the Child Welfare Truth Telling Collective, and you're going to get to hear some of the things that we are thinking about together and learning together. And I'm delighted to pass it over to my dear friend and teacher, actually. I learned a lot of what I know about family group conferencing from Anita Horner. And so welcome, Anita.
Well, thank you, Marilee, and that's mutual. I've learned a lot from you as well. So in addition to being a friend and colleague, I also see you as a teacher and thought partner as we do this work ongoing. So once again, welcome everyone. Yes, I'm Anita Horner. I am the co-director of the National Center on Family Group Decision Making here at the University of Colorado in the Denver metro area. And I have my background just quickly. I actually started family group decision making back. I learned from the New Zealanders back in 1996 and through the rest of the 90s, because at that point there weren't any trainings yet available on Turtle Island, North America, until towards right around the early 2000s. And so the learning that myself and several of my colleagues got was directly from the New Zealanders at that point. I worked as a coordinator of family group conferencing for several years, and then also supervised the family group conferencing program for one of the Denver metro area counties for several years before being recruited to the national and international level for the National Center in 2005. So I've been working as a trainer, coach, consultant, technical assistant, et cetera, both nationally and internationally since 2005, and have gotten to work in several provinces in Canada. It's always a privilege to be able to come and share time with my Canadian colleagues. So I see some familiar faces here as well as I look at the screen. So it's good to see you and be with you and share this space with you. And I apologize that I did not start with my own land acknowledgement here. So I am coming to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Arapaho, the Ute, and the Cheyenne people. So with that said, I would just like to start us out. Again, I just always welcome the opportunity to be among so many like-minded people. I know that all of you who are joining today, have experience with family group decision-making, mediation, First Nations ways of working with families and decision-making as well. And so again, it's an honor to be here with all of you. So, Marilee, whenever you're ready, I think we can start sharing this.
Sure. So we should probably just orient ourselves here.
Yeah.
Let me just share the first slide. What we're here to talk about today. And then we'll go into the values. So we're here to talk about the power imbalance that exists between family groups and the child welfare system. And I've been hearing a lot today about wanting things to be better. I was just in a workshop where I was reminded yet again, about the outcomes for those children and youth who enter the child welfare system, the foster care system, and that they have basically been unchanged since 1970. And why is it that this system has such power that despite the efforts of a lot of good and hardworking, caring, compassionate people, and we heard from some of them this morning who are at the Secretariat, that we just can't seem to move the needle in child welfare? And why is it that this power imbalance exists and maintains itself? And so with that introduction, I will go to the next slide here, Anita.
So based on what Marilee shared, Marilee, thank you for setting the context here, a little bit of a backdrop. What we've been doing is, as we've continued to work both in family group decision making, we actually, while Marilee is retired, I've got her joining me on a few projects that I'm working on here in the States, and so as a result of that, we're one of the beautiful things about continuing to work with others who are like-minded in this work, as I'm sure you all find, is that we can continue to build on our knowledge and really advance our thinking by having deeper conversations that we don't always get the opportunity to have outside of a arena such as today's arena. And so luckily, Marilee and I have been able to really continue to advance the things that we are understanding about this work, along with the things that we are sharing with others when we do trainings and professional development, etc., that we would not otherwise have the opportunity to share. And so I also am a member of the collective on truth telling that has originated in Ontario. And I'm lucky that they're letting this person from outside of Canada join. I see that as a privilege. So I just want to acknowledge that. And so with that said, we're also taking what we've learned from that as well, and really combining it with our work in child and family group decision making to again advance our own thinking and hopefully to help others to become maybe a bit more aware of some ways to conceptualize the systems in which we work within or with. Marilee, go ahead.
Yeah, and I apologize to all my other ADR colleagues who are here. We're intending that this be a conversation that will be helpful no matter what kind of ADR you're
Yes.
doing. I've only done family group decision making, and so that's where my mind tends to go, but I want to be inclusive and to have this conversation amongst us all.
Thank you for that, Marilee. I also really appreciate you sharing that as well. So I believe this does apply to all of us. I'll leave it to you to determine if it feels like something you want to, work towards and or with as you continue to gain your own additional learnings and awarenesses. So what we're going to start with as a result of that is family group decision making values. And I want to tell you where these come from. We at the Kemp Center at the National Center on Family Group Decision Making did not create these. They were created actually, Mike Doolin, who many of you may be aware of, because I know he's in past years that he came and did some work before he retired with your provinces. And he shared, he worked to develop these using the knowledge and of course experience of being one of the people in New Zealand who helped to promote and advance family group decision making, well, family group conferencing, as we all know, in New Zealand. And so there were set goals, sorry, not goals, set values that really are the framework and the guideposts for this work. And so I know that these may not be as familiar with you, but to you, but I want to really share, because I think it comes down to how we look at the power imbalance between systems and families, and knowing that the work that we're all doing in any facet of ADR is to provide family groups with the opportunity to decrease that power imbalance between systems. The system's always going to have more power than families, but to decrease the imbalance between the two so that the family group has the opportunity to be closer to having the same amount of power as the system does. And so because family group conferencing, family group decision making is intended to address that power imbalance in every phase and stage, we thought it would be helpful for everyone to just really understand, as we have this conversation today about the power imbalances, to look at how the values of family group decision making really help to guide us. And so these are the first 4 values here, and we can certainly provide these values to you as far as a handout. If you all would like that at some point, just let us know in chat, and we can do that. But as you see here, the values, the first 4 values, we're just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about them. Children have a right to maintain their kinship and cultural connections throughout their lives. Children and their parents belong to a wider family system that both nurtures them and is responsible for them. The family group, rather than the agency, is the context for child welfare and child protection resolutions. As I read these, I want to just acknowledge that when you hear the terms agency and or state in these values, again, they were Mike Doolin put them together, and he's a Kiwi, he's a New Zealander. And so really what's intended with those words, you can just replace them with system, really, and really kind of have a good sense about what he's referring to in these values. All families are entitled to the respect of the state, and the state needs to make an extra effort to convey respect to those who are poor, socially excluded, marginalized, or lacking power or access to resources and services. So just to open up a bit of conversation, we will go back to the next four values in just a few moments, but just to open up conversation. Because again, I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm well aware of that in this presentation. And so as we look at these first four, what strikes you about how the attention to the power imbalance shows up here? What do you notice? You can feel free to either unmute or just put something into chat.
I can put them
I
back
would
up.
say family connection, but I'd have to relook at them again.
Yeah, she'll put them right. She's going to put them back up again. Thank you, Sky.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what you have to say. Here she goes.
Maybe I can start us off here a little bit. Number 3 just hits me between the eyes every time I see it. The family group. So by family group, we mean that wider circle around those who are involved with the system. It might be blood, it might be community, it might be chosen family. It has many different definitions. But that is who is the context for child welfare and child protection resolutions, not the system.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's a powerful, powerful statement, and a real statement about power. Imagine if the family group truly was the context. What would our system look like?
Thank you, Marilee. Are there, I appreciate you starting us off. Are there other reactions, thoughts about these first four, about how they impact or address the power differential between systems and families? Haley, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just, number one really strikes me as well. Children have a right to maintain their kinship and cultural connections throughout their lives. When I was working with the PAPE Adolescent Resource Center, what's been sort of coming to mind a lot, it was a long time ago, but during this workshops, is that the kids would say, you know, that they took us away from our parents and now we don't have any family. And where the state doesn't treat us like family, they treat us very badly in that sense, and we have nobody to go back to. Like there's not that connection. They've lost it. The family's estranged, or there's a lot of anger, and they just don't know how to go back and make those connections as well. So I keep thinking that if, you know, family group is definitely one way of looking at prevention in terms of maintaining that relationship in whatever way we can that allows them, when they do age out, at least there's somewhere they can connect back to, you know, whether it's an aunt or somebody in the community, as you're saying, Marilee, or chosen family that was around. Yeah, and I think that's something that I think we should be responsible for as a society, is trying to find a way to keep them connected.
Oh, I so agree with you, Haley. Thank you so much for speaking up. I think that, you know, we think about you know, the fact that there hasn't been an automatic assumption by the system, I'll say by the system, and then those of us who work in the system usually are mandated by the system to do things a certain way. And the system has not typically said that children have a right to maintain their kinship and cultural connections. That's been rather new, right? And so, so your point is well taken. Absolutely.
I can, it's Raquel, if I can bring
Hi,
your
Raquel.
attention to, and also, thank you, Haley. We have a comment in the text from Catherine. And she says, I'm a coordinator of an Indigenous circle of care, culturally appropriate way of balancing power and having families and community make decisions for children. Each of these values are crucial to do what I do.
So true. Thank you, Catherine. Somehow it's not showing up in my chat, so I appreciate you sharing, Raquel, truly. And I will also say thank you in my native languages of Cherokee and Muskogee Creek, Moro Moro, to Catherine for sharing what she shared, because I believe that to be true as well. So thank you for that. Any other comments before we move on to the next 4 values? Okay, Marilee, if you would advance, if you would put to the next slide. Thank you. So the next 4, the state has a responsibility to recognize, support, and build the family group's capacity to protect and care for its young relatives. Family groups know their own histories, and they use that information to construct thorough plans. Active family group participation and leadership is essential for good outcomes for children, but power imbalances between family groups and child protection agency personnel must first be addressed. The state has a responsibility to defend family groups from unnecessary intrusion and to promote their growth and strength. So as you ponder these, or maybe some of you have seen these before, what are some of the reactions or what strikes you about these and how they address the power imbalance between systems and families? And again, because I can't, somehow chat is not populating for me, I'll ask Raquel, if there are any things that come up in chat, please feel free.
Don't have
Catherine.
anything in chat, but
Okay.
Catherine did raise her hand.
Yes, Catherine, you feel free to go, Catherine.
Right, thank you. Excuse me. So as I commented in my last chat, I coordinate an Indigenous circle of care, and that is based on largely on traditional teachings, cultural values. And when I read through these ones, I mean, this could be, you know, an alternate explanation of what the Circle of Care program is meant to do. But primarily, it is to help balance the power between the agency and families. But as part of that, we look at family not just as mom and dad, but you know, the extended family, the chosen family, the entire communities, with the goal of having those folks who are involved and invested in children's lives, have them making decisions for what is in a child's best interests and what is going to lead to the best possible outcome for them. And it's interesting to me that the values listed here are so parallel to the values of Circle of Care. It's really, it's actually really nice to see that they are so similar.
I agree. And the reason I've got a big smile on my face is, you know, it's the Indigenous ways. And it goes back to that these values were guided and developed by the Maori people, right?
Exactly.
So there you go. I mean, if we look at any Indigenous population, they often have similar values like these when it comes to wider family groups, that the children and parents are nested within a much larger group of people who love and care for them, and that usually whether it's the parents and or whoever the primary caregiver, and the children, they're caught up in a crisis. And by when they come to the attention of the system, they likely have been trying to work through that crisis and figure out how to settle things amongst themselves. And for whatever reason, they've not been able to. They become involved with the system. And then the system often then just asks those very same people, how are you going to fix it? Or what can we do? Or can you come up with a plan? Well, they're the ones in crisis and they've been trying to figure out a plan. So the chance that they're going to come up with much different is probably not very high. And that's not out of their lack of wanting to or trying. It's that they have been trying. But when you bring in those who are organically connected to them, who are not caught up in the crisis, but who are going to be in their lives well after we exit as systems, then, that's again going back to the old ways of the wider family group will help sort out what's in the best interest and use their best thinking to create a plan. So thank you for pointing that out. It's definitely an important point. And Brittany, I see that you have your hand up as well.
I just wanted to talk about the number 6, family groups know their own histories and they use the information to construct the thorough plans. I think that just that one jumps out at me because it's that, and like, especially with kids coming out of care and them like reconnecting with family that they didn't even know that they had.
Yeah.
And having the opportunity to find, even having cousins the same age or other siblings, and it just really widens that circle of support and lets them have like opportunities and support that they didn't even know was there.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so important. And systems often have really severed ties. We've done that historically. And, we're not doing children and youth any favors. And Marilee's going to get into that a little bit more so momentarily. Richard.
It's interesting to see a lot of these statements. When I look at these, it reminds me of and I'm glad that they're bringing them forward and recognizing that they're a problem, but so many of these things were embodied by the residential school system.
Yes.
And, they didn't really care who these people were, where they came from. They were going to make them whoever they wanted. And some of it even goes back to the ancient days of some of the church-born children's aids.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in like the Catholic Children's Aid in the States and other organizations like that, and the hardcore beliefs of what they felt and how they dealt with people based on that.
Yes, and for those of us who've had parents and grandparents who and on back who've been involved in the residential school system. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was in residential school here in the States. I can tell you that, and I know they can too, and you probably all hear this about how that continues to echo into our current generations. It certainly has had impact in my generation. And in the next generation after me. So thank you for acknowledging and recognizing that, Richard. Haley.
Hello. I could use some help with number 7. I'm really struggling with that one. I wish would be a goal for sure. I've experienced the opposite where the Children's Aid has pushed back when the family has created a plan. And I could use some curated statements, some ways of addressing it. I think it's different from mediation. It's different from mediation in the sense that we work really hard to make sure we have two balanced people that are able to negotiate, able to listen to each other, and we customize the process so that where it can be neutral. But I just feel that I just want to do so much more, and I have to bite my tongue. I could use some help with number 7. I love it. I think it's true, but it's a tough one. I find just getting the Children's Aid to just ask questions, like not just instead of direct the process, is really challenging, and I would like to work on that one for sure. Thank you.
I wonder, Nate, thank you, Haley. I wonder if we go on, maybe.
I think we do, because I think we're
Yeah.
going to get to what Haley is asking about.
Yeah,
Yay.
Yes. So
Thank you.
yes, why don't we move along? Marilee, you're up. Yeah.
yeah. And so I just want to say, I'm going to take this down for a second. I worked for Children's Aid for a long time. I gave my heart and soul to trying to move the needle. I have enormous respect for people who work in that system.
Yes.
I gave over 20 years of my life to it. And so when we talk about what I'm going to be talking about in a minute, I'm not talking about the people who work in the system. I'm talking about the system itself and how it's designed. And working in the system, I would often rant and rave about it. And why can't it just do this and that? And so what I'm going to be sharing now are actually a couple of slides that are in the new Ontario training curriculum, the coordinator training curriculum that we've added in. And so I also want to introduce all of us to these ideas. And these ideas are born really through the Child Welfare Truth-Telling Collective that Anita and I are part of. And back when we were first starting to meet, we began talking about, there were 6 of us who had all worked in, or some still were working in, the child welfare system. And we began exploring our experiences of what it was like to work in that system. And we began to ask ourselves, why is this system stay so stuck? Every 5 years, every 10 years, whatever, there's a redesign. It's called different things. And this has been going on for a long time, and it stays stubbornly the same. And why is that? And we've come up with some ideas about it. So if we, again, come back to ADR, I think the very essence of ADR is addressing that power imbalance so that those who are on the receiving end of child welfare services have some real say in what happens for their family, for their beloved children. And so ADR is an attempt to address the power imbalance between families and systems. And as Haley said so beautifully, that is not an easy task. ADR also attempts to be more reflective of the family group's culture. And so when a family group has their own ways of sorting things out, and child welfare kind of opens up the space and welcomes them to do that, right there is a power. The power is power imbalance is being addressed. I can remember Mike Doolin talking about, and this was for family group conferencing, that the goal is for the family group to have home field advantage. Their ways, their place, their languages, their way of making decisions. So some of what the what we began to realize in the Child Welfare Truth-Telling Collective, and we were speaking truth about, from our perspective, each of us, of what it was like to work in those systems. And some of us also have lived experience in those systems, growing up in it, being a parent investigated, a grandparent whose first grandchild was apprehended. We really have begun to identify that it's a colonial system. It's a continuation, and it's meant to be this way. System, not the people working in it. It's a continuation of the residential school system. And it's rooted in this notion that separation creates safety. That's the ultimate safety intervention that child welfare has. A lot of legal power for separation to create safety. I suspect that this code, we call it, is present in a lot of our mainstream systems. We're in conversations with some some colleagues who are really having a long, hard look at the criminal justice system. And when I shared these codes with them, they said, oh my goodness, Marilee, you're describing the criminal justice system. So, and we're not meant to talk about these things. I'm a white settler. I benefit from all of this. And when we first started talking about this, I almost felt like I was breaking some rules and the earth was going to open up and swallow me up or something. And we call them, we're calling them child welfare codes. What's deep in the DNA of child welfare that keeps it so stuck? That's why this DNA strand is over here. So this separation creates safety notion. And the next slide, we'll dig into that a little bit more. Another one of the codes, and anyone who's worked in this system or been on the receiving end of this system knows this one well too. Keep silent about the harm that's caused. People have lost jobs. Families have gotten into all kinds of trouble if they've spoken up about the harm they've experienced. And the third kind of code is this protecting whiteness, protecting the privilege of the systems that are here, essentially so that I can continue to live on stolen land. And that is not disrupted at all, or even the power that I just inhale and I'm blind to. And so we're not going to go into, and the individual rights, absolutely. I mean, we know that the systems as they currently exist look at individuals. They rarely, if ever, look at the collective. Even this morning, talking about youth, that presentation that was very helpful and lots of good information. It's like the youth are just on some desert island somewhere all by themselves. So what I'd like to just unpack with you a little bit is this notion that separation creates safety. So if we can for a moment assume that that's part of the bedrock of child welfare and probably other systems, what happens when that is the underlying value? That's deep in the DNA. That leads to these things that we all know so well. Out of family care, loss of identity, language, culture, loss of family relationships, belonging, loss of land. The workshop I was just in before this one, Nadia's she talked about one of the outcomes really of being in care is loneliness. That loss of identity, that loss of sense of belonging. That's what this code does, which then leads to dehumanization, oppression, intergenerational trauma, colonization. This is what the residential schools were designed to do and tried to do really well. Lots of harm happened. So if we think back to those values that Anita shared earlier, and as Catherine spoke about so beautifully, really it's a different worldview of inclusion and connection creating safety, not separation creating safety. Now, I don't want to say for a moment there are not times in extreme circumstances where separation is the only solution, but I think it's extremely rare. So what if we had inclusion and connection in the deep in the DNA of child welfare? And this is where I think ADR sits, is this inclusion and connection place, but where the friction between the paradigms is extraordinary. And I think, Haley, that gets to your point, that the system isn't built to do these things. Inclusion and connection, kinship care, identity, language and culture, family relationships, belonging, land, which ultimately are the opposite of what happens in the end: humanization, equity, reconciliation, strong communities. So in the ADR world, we're working from this set of values. Many workers, those that I have a lot of respect for, my colleagues and my friends, and my own values are these. If it was my family, I'd want these green spaces. I wouldn't want the blue ones up there. For my own family, my own beloved grandchildren, heaven help you if you tried to get between me and my grandchildren. One of the other interesting things about this slide is that the font is exactly the same size in the blue and the green. And it looks so much bigger in the green. So I am going to pause here and just see any thoughts, reactions. When we talk about power, this is the power right here. The power to separate children from their families. That's the power the system holds. And I know those of us who work in it fight really hard against that. And even the OCLs and others who just trying to keep it from running rampant. And it gets exhausting.
Marilee, we do have a comment.
Yes,
in the chat.
sure. Yeah.
It is from Sky, and the comment is the CAS system was created by the residential schools. So I think somebody else had mentioned that. So there's a lot of agreement in the participants.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, one of our collective members, Andy Coster, some of you probably know Andy, has been digging into the archives in Ontario, here where he lives, trying to understand what led to the 60s scoop. And I think they gave a presentation actually last year at this ADR PD day about some of the things that they're learning. And he would completely agree. As the residential schools closed, those children left the residential schools and went into the foster care system. The foster care system was originally designed for white, poor children. He's looked at the archives from the CAS of Toronto in particular. And Indigenous and African Canadian children are never mentioned. It was originally for white, poor children. And when the residential schools closed, then it engulfed Indigenous children and African Canadian children, so much so that Black and brown children are vastly overrepresented in the child welfare system today. And yeah, I know Cindy Blackstock talks a lot about that. And so this as a colonial system, it's what it's designed to do.
I was sorry, just going to say that my understanding too about how it sort of came about, not the CAS, but sort of helping families was during the wars, that when the women were single, if they were struggling, they could drop them off at a home, and they could leave them there for however they needed, and they could go and pick them up when they were feeling better, and there was no judgment. It was just you were struggling, and we took your children in for a while, and now you have them back. And yeah, there's a lot of judgment. So I think that's also our issue is, the recognition that families are going to struggle and they need support. They don't need them necessarily taken away, or maybe in a way that if they are away, they're there for a short period of time, or they're there till the parents can come back and get them.
Yeah, and often that would happen in families, that somebody would go to auntie for a while or whatever. You know, I have a colleague, I don't know, she's not here in this workshop right now, who grew up in the system, and she said something definitely needed to be different for me as a child. What was going on for me was not okay. But what I got was even worse. It wasn't the help I needed. So, Sky.
So kind of going back to your last slide that you had. The dehumanizing and whatnot, like everything that you shared just pretty much continues that cycle of oppression for our kids. Of obviously I'm First Nations. I don't know if that's visibly obvious. But I've worked in child welfare for about almost 2 years now, not including school. So previously I was the Indigenous knowledge keeper at my old job. So I did oversee a lot of the First Nations kids in our program. And even for myself, like just being the worker that's involved with them, they were very happy with that because they found that it was a lot of non-natives that were working with them, and they didn't really like that, and they wanted that cultural connection. So kind of just continuing that and showing them that they do have somebody on their side too who's willing to advocate for them has been really great, especially for them learning how to advocate for themselves too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you, Sky. Thank you for sharing your efforts. I mean, it's because that system just gobbles people up and spits them out that that dehumanization happens. And I'm sure the children you're working with benefit from your commitment. So thank you. And that's reducing the power imbalance. They know who they are. They're rooted in who they are and what matters. Yeah. Nancy. Oh, Nancy, we can't hear you.
She's unmuted, but we can't hear her. So Nancy, if you want to write your comment in the chat, I can share that on your behalf.
Are you not able to hear me
Oh,
now?
Oh, yeah. Now
Sorry,
we
my
can.
apology. So thank you for great presentation, get us thinking as usual, Marilee and Anita. What I was reflecting is that we in each of our roles have choices of how we can try and be an agent of change, to facilitate shifting that balance gently as we are working with the agencies to prepare them for whether it's family group conferencing or child welfare mediation, that we have an opportunity to try and help shift some of this power back to the family gently by educating and supporting, by addressing the concerns that the workers, myself, similar to many of you, have been also working many years in child welfare as a worker, as supervisor, training, and so on. And so I know that it's difficult to deal with the anxiety of the potential of what if. So it's helpful to have someone like us to support them as they're, so we all navigate these challenges of power.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And you're anticipating our next slide here, so hold your thoughts. Seth.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. I just kind of wanted to follow up a little bit with Sky's comment. I do a lot of work with the First Nations up where I'm at, and one of the things that comes up quite often is colonization. I mean, we talk about some of the Indigenous youth not understanding their own history and how that affects them now, and how that it's affected their parents. And so, I deal with a lot of Indigenous youth that are Two-Spirit or LGBTQ. And when we don't have the information, we really struggle kind of supporting those youth and the parents, right? So always looking for ways to kind of grow outside of the system itself and finding those ways to support the families and the youth in whatever capacity we can to kind of get them through and move them through those situations, oppression and racism and discrimination, all that stuff, because that also leads to anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicide, and all those other things, right? So I think it's really important. Sorry.
That's okay.
My kids just got home from school, so the dogs are excited.
Okay.
But yeah, I just wanted to kind of tap into that a little bit because I know how important it is. And I mean, it's something that we see more now than we have ever seen. Assisting those marginalized groups, kids coming from generations of family trauma and the lack of supports and resources. And that creates a whole new world for us to kind of navigate through, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's repairing. Inclusion and connection create safety, not separation. Separation does not create safety. It creates all those harms that you've just listed, Seth. So
I think just one more point before I know we're getting to time. One of the things that I struggle with too often is, folks that are in this field have their own upbringing, their own biases, their own, culture, religion, all those sorts of things. And they intertwine that in with how they treat people on that social service level. And that becomes more damaging for your clients and your families. So I'm asking folks to just, moving through those pathways of care for these kids and these families to have that at heart. I mean, we have to understand that we're people first before labels and colors and cultures and those sort of things. And I think that's going to save us a lot of damage moving through into the future, upcoming years.
Yeah. Thank you, Seth. That's
Thank you.
we always need to be reminded of that. One thing in the collective that we found really was that whiteness just permeates the air. And think of assessment for a child to be placed even with a kin family member. What values are behind it, right? Yeah. So I have kind of, and I know we're time is ticking. It's never long enough to have these conversations. But if we think about our roles, whatever roles you happen to be in, if you're in an ADR role or other roles, I mean, you could, here it says ADR work, but just substitute whatever role you're in. How does this separation creates safety code show up? So we put a few ideas up here about how it might show up in ADR work, and I would love to hear from you all what else you think should be in here, but certainly who is invited? Who is invited? We get all tangled up in individual rights and parental rights and this person doesn't like that person, or the mom said no, her sister can't come. Are we unintentionally supporting separation creates safety rather than inclusion and connection, creating safety? What are the words we use? One of the things we've done in the collective are some workshops. I think a colleague and I did one last year at this ADR day. What are the everyday words that we use in child welfare? And the first time we did this, we had people from both Canada and the US, several provinces and several states. We all understood what those words meant. And as we looked at them more deeply, so many of them are rooted in military language, even frontline worker. That's a military term. And so to really think carefully about how do we describe people, how Do we call them by name or do we call them by role? Do we call them my families, the families, or my children, the ones we work with? Well, are they my children, my families? If they are truly my children or my family, yes. So there's a lot for us to think about in the words that we use. How much space is there for the family group to exercise leadership? Has the power of the system limited the choices so much that really all they can do is fill in the blanks, that they don't really have the space to determine what's going to work best for them and the system has to adapt. And I know how hard that is. I've been in tears, honestly, at times, just so frustrated by the requirements of the system. Yeah, what are the decisions that are made through ADR? I think a lot of times referrals come much later down the road when maybe the agency's already determined the child cannot return home and they're petitioning the court for permanent removal. Even removal, there's another military term. What about earlier on? How can the child go back home? Or the youth who are starting to transition out of care? Can they go back home? Back to their family? And certainly I know from my colleagues, I mean, I've been out of child welfare now almost 5 years, but I keep hearing how utterly exhausted child welfare staff are, the high turnover rates, the stress levels. People who've been in it for 20 and 30 years are telling me, Marilee, it's never been like this. And so that's how that code shows up too. Staff are just exhausted. And so I leave you with this question of what does resistance look like based on where you're located? Resistance to this code of separation, creating safety, and support for what Catherine spoke about and Sky for that inclusion and connection, creating safety rather than separation, creating safety. And I'll stop now. And I know we're just about out of time. Are there any comments coming up, Raquel, or?
There are no comments at this time. I'm sure everybody's deep in reflection. It was such a wonderful slide to close with, but there might be somebody who's trying to say something. I did hear some voices.
Yeah. So any last thoughts or words or? I always want to say, Richard, thank you. I always wonder, have I completely lost my mind?
Well, I want to thank both presenters for a wonderful learning and sharing and including us in the reflection. And so always much work ahead. We have come a good way, but clearly we still have much work to do. But we've started this conversation, and I think those are the very first important steps. So thank you, everyone.
We do have a question here. Richard has had his hand up, so just want to see if we could just for a moment hear from.
Actually, it's just a comment. That you guys have restored my faith in a system that I thought was totally lost. I've had, the fact that people are talking about it and that people are asking questions and they're stepping up that you guys are stepping up to challenge the system. Because I know friends that have been involved in the system and it is beyond unbelievable. And it really needs absolutely everything you guys can throw at it. And I think that you guys should be honored for the work that you're doing.
That means a lot, Richard. You know, when we first started talking about this, we thought, holy, are we gonna get out of here in one piece? But thank you so much. It just kind of continues to motivate us, right?
And the recognition of the fact that the jail system is exactly the same is
Mhm.
absolutely 100% correct. It is terrible, and it really needs to have people that have been on the streets, and I mean the streets of the system,
Right.
taking a really good deep look at it and seeing what's really going on and really seeing why it needs to be changed.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just put in a plug. I put my email in here, and it's also in the PowerPoint, which you will be getting from Linda, that we do webinars. They're all free. And we have quite a series of them coming up. We're going to be doing some truth circles for those of us who work or have worked within the system. And so if you want to go on the mailing list, please just email me and I'll be sure you're on the mailing list and you'll be getting invites to the various events that we host.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, so thank you very much,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone. The